David is in his car riding down the streets of New York, making jokes to his driver about the deprivation of the destitute people on the streets. He mentions his cousin Matt, who is an actor doing a show on Broadway. They plan to hit all the underground spots of New York together. He is suspicious about why his driver didn't drop him off at the Village like he asked, but the driver is abiding by the instructions David's mom gave him to drop him off directly to the meeting. David criticizes his driver for the betrayal and gets to the building where his meeting is. He makes his way to a room full of young people dancing weirdly to music. He can't believe what he just got himself into. They are a part of the summer semester of Connections. The organizer of the event, Dorsey, introduces different people that the attendees can talk to about different matters, and invites Sarah forward to talk about her project, Drama Dreams. David finds it insufferable to listen to Sarah talk so enthusiastically about her passion project, which is a creative and inclusive space for actors. Everyone is helping themselves to the food, while David is trying to look engaged in a conversation he is completely not interested in. David finds the music annoying, and the guy he is talking to just assumes that it is because of sensory overload. David plays it off cool, and later tells his mother he won't go back there again. His mother argues that he has to, if he doesn't want to go to jail and ruin his father's life. David turns to his father for support, who tries to explain that he just has to attend the meetings and sign his name for 6 weeks, because it's court mandated. He is assigned there for making pig jokes to a cop, and is worried about what his girlfriend Angie would think when she hears of this. His mother assures him that she'll handle her, but David insists that he doesn't belong there. He is upset, so his mother coddles him and gets him settled down in his room. There, he chats on the computer with Angie, and it seems like he is texting her for the first time, which contradicts what he told his parents earlier. At the next meeting, Sammy and Mar introduce themselves to each other while everyone else pays attention, except David, who is busy on his phone. He is texting Matt, trying to meet up with him, but apparently, he's too busy with rehearsals. The members of the meeting hear the sounds of him typing, and all eye him with annoyance for being disrespectful. Dorsey asks for the next pair of members, and Sarah volunteers immediately. Dorsey tries to partner her with Andrew, but he doesn't seem to be doing well, so she asks David to jump in. After explaining the prompt of the conversation to them, Dorsey tells them to start. Sarah initiates the conversation and tries to involve David too, but he doesn't cooperate much with her. Sarah turns to Dorsey to report David's lack of participation while he remains quiet. Other members give feedback on how David could feel more welcome in the conversation, so Dorsey asks David to start with the topic of his interest. David brings up the Brooklyn Bridge, and when Sarah suggests they make plans to go there, David gives a morbid reply that they should both jump off of it together. David tries to cover up his rudeness, but Dorsey assigns them homework to work on their conversational skills together and report back to the group in the next meeting. After the meeting is over, David is waiting for the elevator while Sarah tries to convince him to commit to their Brooklyn Bridge activity. She is really excited to prove herself to Dorsey. David doesn't care and goes away, ignoring her totally. David is at a cafe for his date with Angie, who is pleased to finally meet a nice and normal man. They have an interesting conversation, and David is having a good time. He gets excited talking about a U2 concert, and Angie finds something off, but doesn't let it show much. She asks him if he always keeps his sunglasses on, so he pulls them off. This causes him to snort and make some involuntary sounds, but he makes the excuse of having allergies. He tries to crack a joke to lighten the conversation, but Angie gets uncomfortable. He tries harder, and she feels strange, before she excuses herself to go to the bathroom. David watches her walk away, and later even tries to find her in the ladies' washroom, but she's not there. Later on, he is editing some footage on his laptop in his room. Then he logs into his online dating profile and starts browsing for potential matches. He reaches out to a woman named Audrey, but it seems like they already went out 2 years ago. She calls him a weirdo and threatens to call the cops on him. David slams his laptop shut and puts a pillow over his head, muffling his exasperated cries. The next meeting that he attends is centered around drama therapy. They will be working the whole summer toward a performance. The members of the meeting are excited to hear this. The instructor wants them to explore themselves and express themselves to the world. This is the reason why their performances will be created around the ideas of their favorite superheroes. The instructor, Delilah, asks them to question themselves. If they had a superpower, what would it be? Everyone seems to love the idea, except for David. After the meeting is over, Sarah follows David outside the building and calls him out about missing their homework assignment of writing a report on the Brooklyn Bridge together. David wants to handle the situation professionally and offers to pay money to Sarah for her to complete the assignment by herself. Sarah has had enough of his behavior and tries to be assertive as she tells him that if he doesn't cooperate, she will go to Dorsey and speak her mind. David finally surrenders because he has had enough of her nagging and hails a cab for them to go to the Brooklyn Bridge together. When they are sitting in the taxi together, Sarah admits that she gets scared in taxis and prefers traveling in a bus as it's much safer. David criticizes her way of living because she constantly commits to a system that David finds very strange and unusual. David prefers a different lifestyle. He wants to travel on his own terms and shares his horrible experience when he traveled in a bus once and was harassed by a homeless man. He wanted to call out homophobic slurs, which is another of his clever puns. He tells her that whenever she will be traveling with him, they will need to ride in a cab, because that is what rich people like him do. He hands the money to the driver and tells him to keep the change. When they are at the Brooklyn Bridge together, Sarah encourages him to join her, because she is so excited to visit the Brooklyn Bridge for the first time in her life. David doesn't seem to share the sentiment and avoids her. Even when they are walking, he walks some steps ahead of her, so as to not be seen with her out of embarrassment. David wants to go, because he is no longer obliged to be there. But Sarah doesn't know how to get home, because she only knows how to take the bus from the JCC, from where she counts 13 stops until she gets off the bus. He can't believe that she's 24, has been living in New York all her life, and still doesn't know how to get home. Nevertheless, he drops her off at the JCC stop, from where she can take the bus. She asks him about writing the report again, and blurts out that she is strongly attracted to him. The next morning, David seeks his mother's permission to let Geraldo drive him around the city. He hides his true intentions in front of his mother and visits Sammy's auditions for his play. Naturally, Sarah is there, running lines and singing with Sammy. David watches her from afar quietly, but Sammy spots him and asks him to take up the leading role in his play. David also finds out that Matt has been Sammy's idol since he was a teen. Sammy requests David try on some clothes for his role, which David tries avoiding at first, but finally gives in due to Sammy's persistence. Later on, David and Sarah are walking together, and David makes a comment about how the people in their program seem abnormal and weird. He tries to teach her to not draw negative attention towards herself and be more normal so that people won't think she is strange. He thinks that Sarah is better than the people in the program and is oblivious to that fact, while Sarah seems to be unapologetically herself. Sarah tells him that she has autism, as well as a learning disability. She asks what David struggles with, but he beats around the bush and doesn't give her a clear answer. Before she leaves on her bus, David asks her out for dinner, but it seems like she has plans for every day of the week. He coaxes her into ditching her plans on Friday for him, and kisses her. She hops on her bus that just arrived, with a smile on her face, and leaves. At the next meeting, all the members share what their dream superpowers would be. David wishes to be invisible, but laughs it off in a joke. He and Sarah spend time with each other after the meeting. He cracks one of his inappropriate jokes, which Sarah only half understands because of her naivety. She calls him out on how racist and offensive his joke is. The more confused she gets at his inconsiderate humor, the more self-conscious he becomes. She demands to know the meaning of the joke, but David grows even more nervous in trying to justify himself. They hold hands and listen to music together. David is ordering some food for them when he runs into Sammy, who mistakenly perceives David to be gay, even though he has denied it multiple times. He goes on to invite David and Matt to the members' exclusive club of show tunes on Friday, which is the same event that Sarah loves. David turns down the invitation, because he is supposed to be on a date with Sarah that day. Sammy mentions that Sarah is the star of every show on the show tunes. But when he discovers that Sarah is David's girlfriend, he takes back his offer and forbids him from coming. On Friday night, David waits for Sarah to show up for their date, while she is at the show tunes meetup. He crashes the gathering, holding flowers for her. Sarah doesn't look too pleased to see him. She takes the flower from him, while he offers to take her out for dinner after she's done with the show tunes. She tells him to revisit this matter later. This is when one of the guys, Will, discredits David's life, career, and film completely, and then moves on back to the show tunes, asking Sarah to sing. Sammy protests that he is never asked to sing first. Will responds that being his girlfriend comes with special privileges that only Sarah can enjoy. David is extremely confused, and tries to make sense of this situation with Sammy. He explains to him that Sarah is somewhat of a player who doesn't hold much regard for people's feelings, and likes to play with men's hearts. He advises David to not expect anything other than dates and sex from her. David struggles to deal with the reality that has just dawned upon him. The girl he thought to be so pure and naive actually played with his heart, and wasn't even serious about him. He takes his anger out on one of the homeless people on the street. The next day, he crashes the rehearsals for Sammy's play again, because he wants to talk to Sarah, who has been having a regular day. He confronts her directly, and she responds that she was unclear if he'd be willing to be in an open relationship. She wants to have fun and explore all the options she has. David finds this ridiculous and calls her promiscuous, while also explaining the meaning of the word to her. She claims that he's pressurizing her and he withdraws, leaving her be. At the next meeting, Dorsey asks them about their experience on the Brooklyn Bridge, and they both have polar accounts. David calls the experience irritating, while Sarah finds it enjoyable. They both steal glances at each other from across the room. David is sitting by himself outside the building when Geraldo pulls up to pick him. This is when Sarah takes David in an embrace and kisses him. He cheers up and hugs her. Geraldo rolls his eyes at them as they make out. They go on a really fun date to Kenai Island, where they both meet in the middle, accepting each other's quirks while spending quality time together. Sarah adjusts to David's fear of going on the rides, and David compromises for her, as she doesn't want her feet to touch the sand, and therefore doesn't go to the beach. They are in a merry-go-round when sensory overload makes David tick and make noises. Children start giving him looks, and Sarah watches him get even more upset over this. He starts to explain himself to Sarah, trying to prove that he's normal and fine, but she just gives him a hug to comfort him. David has an awkward encounter with Will at one of Sarah's rehearsals. They go out again and have fun. He also takes her to see Matt's Broadway show. After the show, David is trying to meet up with Matt, while Sarah is trying to initiate a conversation with the security guard. David wants to take Sarah backstage, so he tries to negotiate with the security guy, but to no avail. They are walking the empty streets at night, which seems to be a new experience for Sarah. David brings her to a fancy restaurant, where Sarah can't understand the menu at all, because it is in Italian. She finds it very confusing, almost unintelligible, when a server named Kevin greets them. He names some dishes which are like music to their ears. David heads out to call Matt again, because he is holding the table for him, while Sarah orders. David even offers to meet up with Matt for drinks, but he makes an excuse that he can't get out of his cast party. David comes back to a table full of food, and Sarah is all giddy. He asks for the check while Sarah stuffs her face with all the food. David later gets in trouble with his parents about the $900 bill made that night at the restaurant. His mother wants to know what he did that cost him so much, so he excitedly tells his parents that he's met a girl. His mother just assumes that this woman is also one of the internet women or imaginary girlfriends he usually talks about. He tries to prove to his mother that this girl is real, but she doesn't believe him. He shocks his parents by declaring that Sarah wants to marry him. When his mother connects the dots and realizes that the girl is from David's support group, she decides that Sarah is a gold digger. David is strictly instructed to only attend his classes and return home straight away. His mother is worried about who will take care of him once his parents aren't alive anymore. David visits Sarah's grandmother's house. She caresses his face lovingly, introduces him to her grandmother as her boyfriend, and admits that she is an alcoholic. David excitedly shows his movie to Sarah on his phone. It is a compilation of videos from his childhood, showcasing all the core memories of his life. He tells Sarah that the beautiful girl in the video was his prom date, whom he didn't even get to kiss, because that's how cruel high school was. The video then descends into a chaotic collection of clips, some borrowed from cartoons or movies, while others show David in an unhinged state, or getting bullied. Sarah watches the whole thing quietly, and when David asks her what she thinks of his autobiography, she tries to speak her mind. But David starts to compliment his own film excessively, putting words in her mouth, and not letting her complete her narrative. She gives a positive review of everything except the ending, which she finds really confusing. David spells out the thought process behind it, that he didn't choose to be this way when he grew up. He believes that sometimes people get sad endings, and that is realistic. He addresses his tics, but Sarah wants to give a positive critique as well. She loved his childhood memories. David doesn't let her finish and announces that Matt will show this film at the Palm Beach International Film Festival, which will be David's big break into Hollywood. He vulnerably asks Sarah whether, even though she sees him being driven around town in a limo and treating her to fancy restaurants, she thinks he is a bum with no future. Sarah denies this notion completely and assures him that she finds him very bright, smart, sensational, and attractive. She makes a pass at him and confides in him about how aroused she is. David notices her hand on his lap, and things escalate after that. Sarah takes off her clothes and lies down on her bed in just her underwear. She navigates David's hand around her body, and he leans in to kiss her. They share beautiful, intimate moments together. They attend another one of their support group's events, where everyone is dancing and having a blast. Sarah grabs David by the hand, trying to drag him to the dance floor. She assures him that it will be easy to learn, and it will be fun. But David is still shy and reluctant. David starts to bust moves without thinking about what others would think of him, because he knows he is surrounded by people who won't judge or ridicule him. David and Sarah dance in bliss together and kiss, while Will watches them from the sidelines. The group is at dinner when Sammy makes a toast for Sarah and David. He is proud of Sarah for finally finding true love, after dating many men, and is optimistic about their future as a couple. Sammy believes that they'll get married. David cracks one of his typical, unwarranted jokes, and everyone at the table actually laughs, as they find it funny. David has never felt more accepted before. He adores the welcoming and nurturing world Sarah has introduced him to. He cracks another joke, the one that actually landed him there, and everyone bursts into laughter. In another meeting, Dorsey informs the group that their showcase event, Night to Shine, is approaching, and registration for the fall semester is open. When Sarah is signing herself up for the fall semester, she notices that David isn't registering. She wants to know why he's leaving, but he doesn't have a solid reason to give her. He wants to learn if Sarah wishes to have a life like a normal grown woman too, and when she says yes, he proposes to her. He knows in his heart that he doesn't want to end up with anyone else, and wants to marry her. He invites her to come with him to Florida. When his mother hears of this, she immediately forbids it, because she can't let a stranger come with them for 6 months. David tries to persuade her, but then breaks the news that he has already invited her to stay over the weekend with them, and that she is in his bedroom right now. Sarah has dinner with David's family, where she is asked about how they met. His parents are somewhat annoyed and bothered by Sarah's personality, mannerisms, and the fact that David is so serious about her, when they've only dated for 2 weeks. Sarah attends a party at David's house, and tries to mix in with his relatives, even pretending to understand their jokes and trying to have conversations with them, while David's mother watches in horror. David's mother tries to stop her endless eating, in a not-so-subtle way. Matt is also nearby in his boathouse, so David takes Sarah to meet him. Matt introduces David and Sarah to his friends, and shares the happy news of his engagement. Sarah starts talking explicitly about the sexual relations she and David have had, and starts singing. David tries to stop her, and everyone applauds, but she keeps singing, and David feels very embarrassed in front of Matt and his cool friends. He insults and humiliates her in front of everyone. Sarah feels the same as David has always felt, for the first time in her life. He ditches her for Matt and his friends, and she has to walk back on the sandy beach by herself, which is very challenging for her. He returns to his house to look for her, but she already begged David's mother to be taken home, and is on her way right now with Geraldo. He realizes the mistake he has made, and tries calling her, but isn't able to reach her. He's with his family when Matt asks about Sarah. His mother is thankful that he won't need to take care of someone as mentally challenged as Sarah. Matt tries to point out that she was sweet, but David's mother is more focused on him finding a girl who is more advanced at things than he is, like Melinda, who is one of his exes. She calls Sarah weird, and David finally speaks up, that it was the reason why he liked her in the first place. He has accepted this fact, and that he is weird too, and if his mother can't deal with it, then that's just her problem. He goes to Sammy's play to meet Sarah backstage, but Sammy tells him she's done with him for good. All the members perform at the showcase. Sarah gives her performance too, but she has lost her spark. David follows her to the bus stop, where she is waiting for the bus to head home. When he sits beside her on the bench, she gets up and walks away, hiding from him until her bus pulls up. David does the impossible and enters the bus. He hands a note to the bus driver and tells him to keep the change. But the driver has a no-nonsense attitude and wants the exact change, which David struggles with finding. There is a long line forming behind him, and the driver rushes him, so he calls Sarah for help. He doesn't know how to count money, so Sarah helps him and takes him to a seat. He feels very overwhelmed at first, but then he looks up at Sarah. He realizes that she has been more independent than he ever has been, and yet she never degraded him, regardless of his condescending behavior. Looking at her comforting expression gives him peace and courage that he can be himself too, and will still be accepted. He has found his calm in the storm.